Hi, I'm Ross Waugh from Waugh Infrastructure Management and InfraManage, and today we're just looking at a series of videos that have come from this conference paper that I presented to the Ingenium conference in Dunedin in June 2013. This paper is up on our waughinfrastructure.com website under resources, as are the conference slides. The paper title was Infrastructure Management Forecasting the Changes to 2030. And this is one of the last videos. We're going to look at several short topics that are in the back of the paper, starting at section 11 on page 55, resolving the budget level of service risk triangle. And I'd encourage you to download the paper PDF. You can look at it on your screen or print it out and look along. And so the first slide that you'll see is talking about this budget level of service risk triangle. One of the things that we had a look at a year or so ago, and there's still, I guess, quite a bit of work around early days for this around New Zealand, is we've come off a period pre-GFC where it would be fair to say we've had as much funding as we needed for most asset management, and the levels of service have been held relatively stable or else increased. And the risks, while they could be built into the funding and level of service or are known or dealt with separately, haven't been manifesting themselves too much. And one of the things that we looked at was, and you see the diagram there, is it's like a platen on a pivot. So what our thinking is if you push down funding on a triangle like that, then ultimately the level of service will push down as well, and in theory the risk will start pushing up. And so the question is, what are the dynamics of that and how does that work? So the ways to start thinking about that, levels of service aren't individual points, they're in a band, and so your level of service can move around a little bit before your customers or your consumers will actually notice the change. And so it's how big's that band and where are the change points, so I guess the transition points from one defined levels of service to another. In terms of budget, we are in this period of fiscal restraint, particularly for transportation and other areas as well. We've got this in New Zealand quite highly mobile population that's moving north into the upper North Island and Auckland. And so with the fiscal constraint on budget, how is that going to affect our service levels? Are we going to end up in a situation where we're just doing maintenance and not renewing because we don't think we can afford it, and that might not make long-term economic sense? And in terms of your budget application, how does the application of budget or lack of application of budget move you from one service level band to the other? And then the other thing is with risk, and just thinking about risk, you can think about it as individual assets or critical assets or holistically across whole of business, but it's often risk is hidden until it really affects you, particularly for political or other decision makers. And so it's about how do we explain that risk, how do we demonstrate the changes in the risk profile with the service level changes and the budget changes, and how can we advise decision makers about the impacts of budget decisions in terms of risk. And there's lots of good work going on in that area. I just think the integration of it with the budget and the service level bands has still got a little bit of work to go on that. Auckland Transport, I know, is starting to do a bit of work in that area and starting to do some modelling, but it's early days and we've just got a lot of work ahead of us, which will be forced upon us by the fiscal restraint to be able to inform our decision makers about what lack of budget or what cutting budget does to service levels and what it does to risk. So that's budget risk triangle. And the next topic that I want to look at is skill shortages, doing more with less. Now, prior to the GFC in New Zealand, we were actually starting to bang into quite a serious engineering skills shortage. The global financial crisis has masked that for the last 5 years or so, but it hasn't gone away, and I think it's just starting to rear its head again. And I think certainly over the next decade, we're going to see quite severe problems. And the slide you're seeing is from Bose Allen Hamilton, Global Infrastructure Partners, and it talks about there being 2005 to 2030, $41 trillion of public expenditure on infrastructure, and 15.8 trillion of that in Asia Pacific. Now, it'd be fair to say a fair bit of that's going to be up in China, of that 15.8, but there's no shortage of work for engineers around the world with that sort of capital expenditure coming on stream. The issue for New Zealand is that we're in this period for maintenance and renewal expenditure of quite considerable fiscal restraint at the same time the rest of the world is building out infrastructure. Engineers actually love building infrastructure. They enjoy providing it. They enjoy doing that for a job. And so we've got this question is how are we going to attract and retain engineers? There are government initiatives underway. The engineering courses at the universities in New Zealand have been given funding boosts in more places. Clearly, we're attracting engineers from Asia and from South Africa and from Ireland, particularly at the moment, and the UK. But we're still got issues, and so it's just when you're looking at long-term infrastructure management, one of the things that you do need to look at is where are the constraints likely to be. Australia also has the same sorts of issues with engineering skill shortage. Their wages generally are higher than here. They like New Zealand engineers. We have very similar, or in a lot of cases, the same standards, so it's a real easy transition. And the other thing that we have going on is that we have a lot of boom and bust type stuff going in cycles in New Zealand, not conducive to long-term provision of resources. So I'm thinking that the engineering skills shortage could actually be one of the major constraints in terms of delivering infrastructure through the next 30 years. And so it is going to be a case of how do we do more with less, and thinking about how we manage our way through that, thinking about how we resource our engineering more. It's a whole of industry problem. The sooner we start getting onto it and addressing it, the better. So that's engineering skills shortage. The paper has a short section on Local Government Act, and I'm not going to talk about that in the video here. I just think if you want to look at that, there's just a few words that it's quite technical and probably doesn't lend itself to this video. I have got a slide up just coming up now around Auckland resilience, and you'll notice the picture in the bottom is from the recent train wreck in Canada that destroyed half of a small town with oil tankers, and the top photo is Auckland Harbour and Rangitoto in the background at sunrise, and you go, well, that's lovely, but what happens in a major infrastructure area like that when you do get one of these sort of out of bounds black swan type events where you haven't worked on it and you lose major infrastructure for a period of some months or even some years? And I think when you look at Auckland's growth, where we're going from 1.4 to 2 million people, the resilience of Auckland's ports is quite a key choke point. And so you start thinking in terms of, well, the alternatives are Northport and Tauranga. But if we had to bring everything through them, are the roading and rail networks up to that or even in place? And so the answer at the moment is partially. And so I think there's quite a bit of work still to be done, particularly around infrastructure resilience and particularly around these sorts of events that do occur very infrequently, thankfully, that might wreck infrastructure, and what can we do about it and how can we plan for it? And is there some small things that we can do to armour up our infrastructure around our larger cities? And I think there are some good answers to that. I don't really want to go into them in detail in a public video like this, but if you're in planning in those areas, have a think about it. Look at your lifelines plans, look at where your alternatives are, and look at just the small amount of work that would be required to achieve that. So that's it for this video. Thanks for watching.